Right. So these are some special terms associated with transport properties. Um, First, let's look at saturation. Saturation is when all of the transport systems which have a maximum rate, basically the number of carriers that bind substances are occupied. All right. Now, that's what we would say would be saturated. An analogy for this, imagine being at an amusement park, all right, and wanting to go on a roller coaster, and the roller coaster only has seats for 10 people. Once all of those seats on the roller coaster are full, no more riders can get on unless someone is able to get off. Okay, so that's what's going to happen in transport systems, is there's going to be a limit to how many molecules can be transported at one time. That limit we call Vmax, or the maximum rate. Okay, so an example of this in your kidneys, when glucose is being transported, there's going to be a limit as to how much can be moved at once. So if there's too much glucose not all of those glucose molecules will be able to be transported. All right. Stereospecificity. All right. This is where these transport proteins are going to recognize specific isomers, which are going to be structures that kind of resemble structures that they transport. Okay. So, for example, glucose transporters distinguish D-glucose from L-glucose. All right. So think of it as like a key that only fits into one specific lock. If the key doesn't match perfectly, the lock won't open. All right, so transport proteins kind of work the same way. They're going to recognize and transport only the specific key, or the specific molecule that they're designed for. All right, so again, like the glucose transporters, um, they you have a D-glucose, which will be one type of glucose, and the L-glucose is going to be its mirror image. All right, so even though they have the same structural components, they're going to be arranged differently, and so we would call those isomers. Well, if they're rearranged, even though they have the same parts, unfortunately, uh, that's not going to be a key that opens that transport lock. All right, and then finally we have the idea of competition. Similar molecules can compete for the same transport protein. All right, galactose will compete with glucose for transport by way of GLUT proteins. All right, GLUT proteins are the proteins that transport glucose. So sometimes if like galactose looks enough like a glucose, it might try to bind and use that transporter. So it's almost like you're competing for those seats. Okay, that's